Get comfortable, because this is not a story about heroes. It is a story about choices, about temptation, about failure, and about the quiet voice that tells you what is right just before you ignore it. This story begins in a kingdom that glittered like gold, but was rotting underneath. From a distance, it looked perfect. Towers shone in the sunlight like polished crowns. Markets overflowed with riches. Music drifted through the streets as though joy itself lived there. But perfection, when it is forced, begins to crack. And beneath that golden shine, something was wrong. The king knew it, even if no one else did. Because long before the apples began to vanish, long before the whispers, long before the fear, he had felt it. A slow unraveling, quiet, patient, inevitable. And so he held tighter to what he believed was keeping it all together. The garden, the tree, the apples, golden, perfect, impossible, and disappearing one by one. The king's garden did not simply grow, it shimmered. At dawn, it glowed with a soft golden haze, as though the sun itself had taken root in the soil. Marble pathways curved through beds of rare flowers, fountains whispered secrets into the air, and at the very heart of it all stood the tree. Not a tree grown by chance, a tree that seemed to remember things. Its trunk was thick and dark, twisted like ancient hands gripping the earth. Its branches stretched wide, heavy with fruit that should not have existed, apples of pure gold, not dull metal, not lifeless treasure. These apples pulsed faintly, like something alive, like something watching. Every evening, as shadows lengthened, the apples were counted, one by one, carefully, ritually, because no one dared admit the truth out loud, but everyone felt it. The apples were not just wealth, they were protection. And then one night, one was gone. No branch was broken, no leaf disturbed, no footprint marked the soil, just absence. And in a place like that, absence was louder than any alarm. The king did not shout at first. He stood in silence, staring at the empty space where the apple had been, his reflection faintly trembling in the polished gold of the remaining fruit. Those who knew him well saw it, the flicker of something beneath his anger. Not rage, fear. Because somewhere deep within his memory, buried beneath power and pride, he understood something no one else did. If the apples vanished, so would everything else. By the second night, another apple disappeared, and the silence in the court grew heavier. By the third, the king's patience broke. "Watch the tree," he commanded, his voice low and sharp. All night, no excuses. The gardener bowed, though unease tightened in his chest. He had tended this garden his entire life, but even he avoided the tree after sunset. Still he obeyed. And that night, his eldest son took his place beneath the branches. The boy arrived with confidence, a bow in his hand, a sword at his side. He looked up at the glowing fruit and smiled, certain that whatever thief dared steal from the king would soon regret it. The hours passed slowly. The garden grew quieter, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, as the clock struck 12, something changed. A faint rustling stirred the air, not from the ground, but above. The boy stiffened, raising his head, and then he heard it. A whisper, soft, almost kind. "You are not the one." His grip on the bow loosened. His eyes blinked once, twice, and then darkness took him. He slept, not the sleep of rest, but the heavy, unnatural kind that drags you under without warning. When morning came, he woke with a start, and another apple was gone. The king said nothing when he heard the report, but his silence was colder than anger. The second son stepped forward the next night, eager to prove himself better than his brother. He laughed at the idea of whispers, at the thought of magic, at the failure of the one who came before him. He would not be fooled. He would not sleep. But midnight does not ask permission, and when it came, so did the whisper. "You are not the one." His defiance faded. His strength slipped, and like his brother before him, he fell. Another apple vanished. By now, something had changed in the garden. The air felt heavier. The light from the apples seemed dimmer, as if each loss was weakening something unseen. The gardener's youngest son watched all this in silence. He was not the strongest, nor the cleverest, but he listened, and when he stepped forward to offer his help, his father hesitated, not because he doubted him, but because he feared what might happen if the boy succeeded or failed. But the king's command was absolute, and so the youngest son took his place beneath the tree. He did not stand, he did not pace. He lay quietly on the ground, eyes open, watching the branches sway above him, waiting. Midnight came, the world stilled, and then the rustling, not loud, not violent, but deliberate. He did not move, he did not breathe, and then he saw it, a shape descending from the darkness above. Wings, golden wings, a bird unlike anything the world had ever known. Its feathers shimmered like liquid sunlight. Its eyes burned with an intelligence that felt almost human, and as it landed upon the branch, the apples around it seemed to glow brighter, as if recognizing something of their own kind. The boy felt it then. Not fear, not awe, but something deeper, as if the moment had been waiting for him. The bird bent its head and snapped at an apple, tearing it free with ease. And in that instant, the boy moved. He sprang to his feet, drew his bow, and released the arrow in one swift motion. The arrow struck true, and yet it struck nothing. The bird did not bleed, did not falter. Instead, it let out a cry, not of pain, but of warning. And as it soared back into the night, one feather drifted loose from its tail, spinning slowly through the air before landing at the boy's feet. Silence returned, but it was no longer the same silence. When the feather was brought before the king, the entire court gathered, and for the first time, they understood. The feather glowed brighter than firelight, brighter than gold, brighter than anything they had ever seen. It was warm to the touch, alive almost, and when held up to the light, faint shadows moved within it, as though it carried memories inside. The council spoke in hushed tones. It is priceless. It is beyond wealth. It is beyond kingdoms. But the king did not smile. He stared at the feather for a long time, too long, and then he said quietly, "One feather is of no use to me." The court fell silent, because they heard it now, the desperation. I must have the whole bird, and somewhere far away in the dark between the trees something listened, something that had been waiting, and for the first time the game had truly begun. The eldest son did not leave in silence. He left with certainty, the kind of certainty that makes a man believe the world will bend for him simply because he wills it to. He walked out of the kingdom with his head held high, the golden feather still fresh in his memory, already imagining the moment he would return, not as a gardener's son, but as something greater, a hero, or so he thought. The road ahead was quiet at first. Fields stretched wide under a pale sky, and the wind carried nothing but the scent of dry earth. But as he walked further, the world began to change. The air cooled, the light dimmed, and soon the path led him to the edge of a wood. Not an ordinary forest. This one stood still. Its trees were tall and ancient, their branches tangled like a web above, blocking out the sun. No birds sang within it. No leaves stirred without reason, if less like a place and more like a presence. Watching, waiting. The eldest son hesitated only for a moment before stepping forward. Confidence, after all, does not like to admit doubt. As he entered the wood, the silence deepened. His footsteps sounded louder than they should, his breath heavier. And then he saw it, a fox, sitting calmly by the side of the path. It did not run, it did not hide, it simply watched him. Its fur was not the dull red of an ordinary creature. It shimmered faintly, catching what little light filtered through the trees, And its eyes did not belong to a beast. They were too knowing, too old. The boy's instincts flared. Without thinking, he reached for his bow, drew an arrow, and aimed straight at the creature. The fox did not move. "Do not shoot me," it said. The voice was calm, almost human. The boy froze. For a brief moment, something inside him wavered. But pride is a loud thing, louder than curiosity, louder than caution. The fox continued, "I know what you seek, the golden bird. I know where it goes and how it may be found." The arrow remained drawn. The boy narrowed his eyes. "And why," he said slowly, "would a creature like you help me?" The fox tilted its head slightly as though amused. "Because you will fail without me." The words hung in the air, sharp, uncomfortable, and for a moment, just a moment, the boy considered lowering his bow. But then came the thought that ruins everything. What can such a beast know that I do not? The fox spoke again, unfazed. "You will reach a village by evening. There are two inns. One will draw you in with light, music, and warmth. Do not enter it. Choose the other, the one that appears poor and empty." The boy let out a short laugh. It wasn't cruel, just dismissive. "Advice from a fox," he muttered, and without another word, he released the arrow. It sliced through the air with deadly precision. But the fox was already moving, not running, not fleeing, but vanishing, like a shadow slipping between shadows. The arrow struck nothing, and in the next instant the fox was gone, its tail flicking once as it disappeared deeper into the wood. For a brief second unease crept into the boy's chest, but he pushed it aside. He had no time for riddles, no time for tricks. He had a golden bird to claim. And so he continued. By the time the sun began to set, the forest had released him, and he arrived at the village just as the fox had said. And there they were, two inns, standing opposite each other like choices made solid. The first one shone. Light spilled from its windows in warm, inviting waves. Laughter rang out into the street, music danced in the air, and figures moved inside, dancing, drinking, living. The smell of roasted meat drifted outward, rich and irresistible. It was alive. The second inn was not. Its walls were crooked, its paint peeling. The windows were dark, the door slightly ajar as though it had been forgotten. No voices came from within. No light, no warmth, only stillness, only emptiness. The boy stopped in the middle of the road, looking from one to the other, and for a moment he remembered. The fox's voice echoed faintly in his mind. "Choose the one that offers nothing." He frowned. Why would anyone choose nothing? Why would anyone turn away from comfort, from joy, from life? He shook his head, almost amused at himself. "I should be very silly," he said aloud, "if I went to that shabby place and left this." And with that, he stepped toward the light. The moment he crossed the threshold of the Grand Inn, the world seemed to change. The warmth wrapped around him instantly. Music swelled. Voices welcomed him. A cup was placed in his hand before he could even ask for one. "Traveler," someone called. "Come, sit, eat, drink." He hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then he smiled and sat. The hours passed quickly after that. Laughter replaced caution. Wine replaced purpose. The golden bird became a distant thought, then a fading one, then nothing at all. But something was wrong, subtly at first. The laughter lingered too long. The music never faltered. The faces around him never seemed to change. And if he had looked closely, if he had truly paid attention, he might have noticed no one ever left. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, time stood still. And far away, in the dark of the forest, the fox watched. Its eyes glowed faintly, not with anger, but with something far sadder. Expectation, because this, too, had happened before. And as the eldest son raised his cup once more, laughing without reason, forgetting without effort, the path he had been meant to walk closed behind him, completely, silently, forever. Time does not pass gently in a kingdom filled with unanswered questions. At first, the absence of the eldest son was explained away. A delay, a detour, a young man enjoying the road a little too much before returning in triumph. But days became weeks, weeks became silence, and silence in a place already haunted by vanishing gold began to feel familiar. The king did not speak of it openly, but his temper grew sharper, his patience thinner. The golden apples were still counted each night, still guarded with growing unease. But now there was something more, a second absence, a second uncertainty. And so the gardener's second son stepped forward. He did not ask permission. He did not hesitate. Because where the first had been confident, the second was determined to prove something more dangerous, that he was better, better than his brother, better than failure, better than whatever unseen force had swallowed the first whole. I will find him, he said, though in truth his thoughts were already elsewhere, not on his brother, but on the golden bird, on the reward, on the glory that had slipped through the fingers of the first and now seemed destined for him. He set out at once. The same road, the same fields, the same slow descent into quiet. And just like before, the world began to change. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, until once again the forest stood before him, waiting. If he felt any unease, he buried it quickly. Pride has a way of silencing instinct. He stepped into the woods, and almost immediately he saw it, the fox, sitting in the same place, as though it had never moved, as though it had been expecting him. The second son did not reach for his bow right away. He had heard the story. His brother had spoken of a talking fox before leaving, half laughing, half dismissive. And now here it was, exactly as described. That alone should have been enough to make him pause, but instead it made him curious. The fox's eyes met his, steady and unblinking. "You seek what your brother could not find," it said calmly. The boy's expression hardened slightly. "And you failed to help him," he replied. A flicker passed through the fox's gaze, or he failed to listen. The words landed heavier than expected. The second son shifted his weight, glancing briefly at the trees around him as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Nothing did, only silence, only waiting. The fox continued, "You will reach a village by evening. 2 inns stand there, one filled with light, laughter, and warmth, the other empty, poor, and forgotten. Choose the poor one." The boy narrowed his eyes, the same words, the same warning. For a moment, he considered it, truly considered it, because now there was proof. Something strange was happening. His brother had vanished. The fox knew things it should not know. The path ahead was not as simple as it seemed. But then another thought rose. If my brother failed by ignoring the fox, then I will succeed by being smarter than both of them. He gave a small, confident smile. "I will choose wisely," he said. The fox did not smile back. "Wisdom is not the same as cleverness," it replied. But the boy had already begun to walk past it. And this time, he did not even bother to aim an arrow, because ignoring advice can be just as dangerous as rejecting it. By the time evening came, he reached the village, and there they were, the 2 inns, exactly as described, one glowing with life, music spilling into the street, laughter echoing against the walls, shadows of dancing figures flickering in golden light. The other, dark, still, almost abandoned. The boy stopped. His mind replayed the fox's warning. Choose the poor one, and for a moment he almost did. But then a movement caught his eye, a figure at the window of the bright inn, leaning out, watching him, familiar, too familiar. His breath caught. It was his brother, the eldest, alive, smiling. "Brother," the figure called, raising a cup in greeting. "What are you doing out there? Come inside." The second son stared, confusion washing over him. This made no sense. He had been gone for weeks. There had been no word, no sign. And yet here he was, well-fed, well-dressed, laughing as though nothing had ever been wrong. "You found it?" the second son asked, stepping closer. "The bird," the eldest laughed. "Forget the bird. Come sit. You've traveled far. You deserve rest." Something in the tone was off. Too easy, too smooth. But it was his brother, flesh and blood, smiling, alive. And suddenly the fox's warning felt distant, unimportant, almost foolish. What danger could there be if his brother stood right there, unharmed? The second son hesitated at the threshold, one step away from the choice, from the path, from everything that had been set before him. Then his brother spoke again, softer this time. "Come inside." And that was enough. He stepped forward. The moment he crossed into the light, the warmth embraced him just as it had the first. Music rose to meet him. Voices welcomed him. Hands pulled him toward the table. And just like that, the questions faded. The doubts disappeared. The golden bird slipped from his thoughts. But as he laughed and drank beside his brother, something unseen tightened its hold. Because the inn was not what it seemed. The windows showed the outside world, but no one inside ever truly looked out. The doors stood open, but no one who entered ever truly left. And if either brother had paused long enough, if they had truly seen one another in that moment, they might have noticed something terrifying. Their reflections did not move quite the same way they did. And somewhere, deep in the forest, the fox closed its eyes briefly. Not in anger, not in surprise, but in quiet understanding. Because now, once again, the pattern had repeated, and the path ahead had grown narrower, waiting for the one who might finally choose differently. Time passed again, not gently, not quietly, but with a weight that settled over the kingdom like a storm that refused to break. 2 sons had gone, 2 sons had vanished, and though no one spoke it aloud, the garden seemed to feel it. The golden apples no longer shone as brightly as they once had. Their glow had dimmed subtly, but unmistakably, as though each loss, each failure, each unanswered question was draining something deeper than light. The king grew restless. The gardener grew silent, and the youngest son, he watched. He watched the empty road that led away from the kingdom. He watched his father's worry deepen into something unspoken. He watched the guards count the apples each night with trembling hands. And in all that watching, something settled inside him. Not pride, not impatience, but resolve. At last he stepped forward. "I will go," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something in it that made the room still. The gardener turned sharply. No, it was immediate, firm, almost desperate. "I have lost 2 sons already," he said, his voice rough. "I will not lose a third." The youngest did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there and waited, because he understood something his brothers never had. Some choices are not made in a moment. They are made in silence, in persistence, in the refusal to step back. Days passed, then more. The request was repeated, not with force, but with quiet certainty. "I will go." Again and again, until at last resistance gave way, not because fear disappeared, but because it could no longer hold him in place. The gardener closed his eyes for a long moment, then nodded. "Go," he said quietly, "and come back." The youngest son did not promise, because he understood something else too. Not all journeys allow promises. And so he set out, the same road his brothers had taken, the same fields, the same slow shift in the air as the world began to change. But where his brothers had walked with certainty, he walked with awareness. He noticed the silence, the way the wind seemed to hesitate, the way the path felt less like something he followed and more like something guiding him. And when the forest finally rose before him, dark, still waiting, he did not rush forward. He paused, because he could feel it now. This was not just a place. It was a threshold. And something within it was watching. He stepped inside. The air grew cooler, the light thinned, and the silence deepened until even his own footsteps seemed unwelcome. Then, as though summoned by his presence, it appeared. The fox, sitting in the same place, as it had for the others, as it had perhaps for far longer than any of them could imagine. Its fur shimmered faintly in the dim light, each movement carrying a strange fluid grace, and its eyes, those eyes held something that made the youngest son still completely. Not fear, recognition, as though the fox already knew him, as though it had been waiting, not for someone, but for him. "You have come," the fox said, not as a question, as a certainty. The boy lowered his gaze slightly, not in submission, but in respect. "I have," for a brief moment neither moved. The forest seemed to lean in closer, listening. Then the fox spoke again. "You seek the golden bird." "Yes." "You have been told what became of your brothers." "I have." A pause, and then, "Will you listen?" The question hung in the air. He could have answered quickly, easily, but he didn't, because he understood the weight behind it. So instead he said, "I will try." The fox's gaze softened just slightly, because that was the right answer. Not certainty, not pride, but willingness. "Do not shoot me," the fox said quietly, "and I will guide you." The youngest son did not reach for his bow, did not question, did not hesitate. Instead he nodded. And in that moment something shifted, not in the forest, not in the world, but in the path ahead. Because for the first time the pattern had changed. The fox rose slowly to its feet. "Sit upon my tail," it said. The request was strange, unnatural, almost absurd. But the boy did not laugh. He did not doubt. Because by now he understood this journey would not follow the rules of the ordinary world. So he stepped forward and sat. The moment he did, the fox moved. Not like an animal, not like anything he had ever seen. It leapt forward with impossible speed, its body flowing over the forest floor like wind given shape. Trees blurred past, stones vanished beneath them. The ground itself seemed to fall away as they moved faster and faster, until the world became nothing but motion and sound. The boy's hair whipped wildly in the wind, the air roared in his ears, and yet he did not feel fear. Only something strange, something almost freeing, as though for the first time he was no longer walking the path, but being carried along it. And as they raced through the forest, something else happened, something subtle, something easy to miss. The fox's form flickered, just for an instant. Not enough to fully see, but enough to suggest something beneath the surface. Something not entirely fox, something older, something bound. But the moment passed, and the forest gave way, and the journey had truly begun. By the time they reached the village, the night had already begun to settle in. Not softly, not gently, but like a curtain being drawn over something that did not wish to be seen. The fox slowed, its movement shifting from impossible speed to a quiet, deliberate stillness. The wind faded. The blur of trees gave way to shapes, then structures, then the faint outline of the village ahead. Two inns stood exactly as promised, opposite each other, waiting. The golden one was alive. Light poured from its windows like liquid warmth. Music spilled into the night air, rich and inviting. Laughter rose and fell in waves, and shadows danced behind the glass, moving in ways that felt almost too perfect, too synchronized, too endless. The shabby inn, by contrast, seemed forgotten. Its wood was worn, its roof sagged slightly. No light shone from within, save for a single faint flicker of a candle barely holding its place against the dark. The door creaked softly in the breeze, as though it had not been properly closed in years. The fox stopped. "This is the place," it said. The young man nodded, but he did not stare at the bright inn. He did not hesitate. He did not allow his eyes to linger where his brothers had fallen. Instead, he lowered his gaze and walked straight toward the poor one. and as he passed the glowing windows, something strange happened. The laughter inside faltered, just for a moment, as though something within had noticed him, as though something had expected him to turn, to look, to choose differently. But he did not, and the moment passed. He pushed open the door to the shabby inn. It creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the stillness inside. The air was cool, faintly scented with dust and old wood. A single figure sat in the corner, an old innkeeper, hunched, silent, watching. No welcome was offered, no questions asked. The young man nodded politely and took a seat, and for the first time since leaving home, he rested. Not the restless sleep of his brothers, not the false comfort of distraction, but real rest, deep, unbroken. And as he slept, something else stirred. Outside, the golden inn grew louder, brighter, almost desperate in its joy, as if trying one last time to draw him back. But the shabby inn held him, quietly, firmly, like a place that knew its purpose. Morning came slowly. The light that entered through the cracked window was pale but honest, without illusion, without shimmer. The young man rose, feeling something he had not expected. Clarity. As he stepped outside, the village had changed. The golden inn was still there. But now, in the daylight, it did not look quite the same. The paint seemed too bright, the windows too polished. And for a fleeting second, he thought he saw faces behind the glass. Not laughing, not dancing, but staring, watching him leave. Then they were gone, and the moment faded. The fox was waiting. Of course it was, sitting at the edge of the road as though it had never moved. "You chose well," it said. The young man inclined his head slightly. "I followed your counsel." The fox's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than before. "And did you understand why?" The question was unexpected. The young man paused, then answered honestly, "No." The fox seemed almost pleased. "Good," it said quietly. "Understanding comes later. First, you must learn to trust what you do not yet see." It turned, motioning him forward. "Now listen carefully." The forest lay ahead once more, but this time the path beyond it felt sharper, more defined, as though each step now carried weight. "You will come to a castle," the fox said. "Before its gates lies a troop of soldiers. They will appear asleep, and they are." A pause. "But not as you understand sleep." The young man's brow furrowed slightly. "Do not wake them, do not touch them, do not even look at them for too long." A faint tension crept into the air. "Why?" he asked. The fox's eyes flickered. "Because some things," it said slowly, "are only waiting for you to notice them." The words lingered, unsettling. "Go inside the castle," the fox continued. "Pass through every hall, every chamber until you find the bird." Its voice softened slightly. "It will be in a wooden cage." The young man nodded. "And beside it, a golden one," the fox said. "Beautiful, perfect, exactly what you think the bird deserves." The fox stepped closer now, close enough that the young man could see something beneath its fur, a faint shimmer like light trapped beneath skin. "Do not move it." The words were no longer advice. They were a warning. "Do not take the bird from the wooden cage. Do not place it into the golden one. If you do, everything will fall apart." The young man held its gaze. "I understand." But the fox did not look convinced, because it had heard those words before. "Understanding is not the same as resisting," it said quietly. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, without another word, the fox stretched out its tail. The young man climbed on once more, and in the next instant, they were gone. The world blurred again into motion. Trees vanished, stones scattered beneath them. The wind screamed past as they raced forward faster than thought. And as they moved, the fox's form flickered again, longer this time, clearer. For just a heartbeat, it was not a fox at all, but something taller, human, bound in chains of light. Then the image shattered, and they were only a boy and a fox once more, racing toward a castle where choices would matter more than ever before. And far ahead, beyond the trees, the first shadow of that castle began to rise, waiting. The castle did not rise from the earth. It loomed, as if it had always been there, waiting for someone to finally arrive. Its walls were pale and cold, catching what little light the sky offered, and throwing it back in dull reflections. No banners moved, no torches burned. It was not abandoned, but it felt paused, as though time itself had been held in place. The fox slowed as they approached the gate, its steps quiet now, measured. "This is where you walk alone," it said. The young man slid down from its tail, his feet touching the ground with a strange sense of finality. He looked up at the towering gates, then back at the fox. "Remember," the fox said softly, "what matters is not what you see, but what you choose." There was something different in its voice this time, not just guidance, but concern. The young man nodded, and without another word, he stepped forward. The gate stood open, not welcoming, not guarded, just open. Beyond them, silence, exactly as the fox had said. The courtyard was filled with soldiers, dozens of them, perhaps more. They lay scattered across the stone like fallen statues, armor gleaming faintly, weapons still in their hands. Some leaned against pillars, others lay flat upon the ground, heads tilted at unnatural angles, asleep, all of them. And yet something was wrong. The young man slowed his steps, because their breathing did not sound right. Too even, too slow, too deliberate. One soldier's hand twitched, another's fingers curled slightly, and for a brief moment the young man felt it, the overwhelming urge to check, to step closer, to look into their faces, to be certain. But then the fox's words returned. "Do not even look at them for too long." He turned his gaze away and walked, past them, through them, without stopping. And as he did, something followed him, not footsteps, not movement, but awareness, as though every sleeping figure could feel him passing and was waiting for the moment he made a mistake. He reached the doors of the castle, pushed them open, and entered. Inside, the air was colder. The halls stretched endlessly, lined with tall columns and shadowed corners. His footsteps echoed too loudly, each sound bouncing back at him like a warning. He moved quickly, room after room, hall after hall, until finally he found it, the chamber. It was smaller than he expected, almost quiet. At the center of it stood a simple wooden cage, rough, unpolished, unworthy of what it held. Inside, perched upon a narrow bar, was the golden bird. It glowed, not brightly, but steadily, like something ancient, something patient. Its eyes opened as he entered, and they locked onto his, not with fear, not with surprise, but with recognition. Below the cage, resting upon a pedestal, stood the golden cage, magnificent, perfect, every bar finely crafted, every detail flawless. It shimmered with a beauty that demanded attention, that seemed to say, "This is where the bird belongs." And beside it, the 3 missing apples, resting silently, waiting. The young man stepped closer, his heart beat faster now, not from fear, but from something else, something familiar, the same quiet voice that had followed him since the beginning. He reached the wooden cage, placed his hand upon it, rough, simple, wrong. He looked at the golden cage, perfect, right, or so it seemed. And then the thought came, soft, reasonable. It would be foolish to take such a magnificent creature in such a shabby prison. He hesitated, just for a moment, and in that moment everything balanced. Everything waited. The fox's warning, the journey, the choices he had made, all of it led here. And then he chose. He opened the wooden cage. The bird did not resist. It allowed itself to be taken, its body warm in his hands, its feathers humming faintly with something that felt almost like power. He turned and placed it gently into the golden cage. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. And then the bird screamed. Not a cry, not a sound of pain, but something far worse. A sound that tore through the silence like a blade, sharp and endless, echoing through every hall, every corridor, every shadow of the castle. The young man froze, because in that sound there was anger, there was warning, there was something almost like disappointment. And outside the soldiers awoke, not slowly, not groggily, but all at once, eyes snapping open, bodies rising in perfect unison, as if they had never truly been asleep at all. The sound of armor clashing echoed through the courtyard. Footsteps thundered, and within moments they were upon him. He did not fight. There was no time, no escape. Hands seized him, weapons surrounded him, and the golden cage was torn from his grasp as he was dragged from the chamber. The bird fell silent, watching, always watching. He was taken before the king. This king was not like his own, where his father ruled with fear hidden beneath control. This one ruled with something colder, certainty. He sat upon his throne, unmoving, his eyes fixed upon the young man, with a gaze that did not need to raise its voice to command attention. The golden bird sat beside him now, in its golden cage, still, silent. But its eyes flickered once toward the prisoner. The court gathered. Judgment was swift. The charges were spoken. The trespass, the theft, the failure, and the sentence, death. The word hung in the air like a final breath. The young man did not speak, because somewhere deep inside he understood. This was the price, not for entering the castle, not for taking the bird, but for the choice he had made, the wrong one. The king leaned forward slightly. "But," he said, his voice cutting cleanly through the silence, "there is a way to earn your life. Hope is a dangerous thing. It rises quickly, too quickly. There is a horse," the king continued, "a golden horse that runs as swiftly as the wind itself. Bring it to me, and you shall live." A pause. "And the bird will be yours." The court murmured. The soldiers remained still. The young man lifted his head slowly. Another task, another chance, another choice waiting ahead. But as he was led away, his eyes met the bird's once more, and for the briefest moment, he understood something chilling. The bird had not been trapped in the wooden cage. It had been protected by it. And now, it was not the only one caught in something that looked like gold. He walked away from the castle with chains no one could see, not iron, not rope, but something heavier, regret. Each step felt slower than the last, as though the ground itself resisted him now. The path stretched forward, but it no longer felt like a journey. It felt like consequence unfolding. He had come so far, he had listened, he had trusted, and yet, at the moment that mattered most, he had failed. The golden bird's scream still echoed in his mind, not just the sound, but what lay beneath it, that strange, piercing sense that he had not merely made a mistake, but broken something, something important. He let out a long breath, heavy with frustration, and for the first time since leaving home, he doubted himself. Truly, because now the path ahead was no longer a choice. It was a demand. Bring the golden horse or die. The thought settled into him like cold stone. And then a voice broke the silence. "You see now." He stopped, and there it was, the fox, sitting just off the path, exactly as before, as though it had been waiting not just for him, but for this moment, for his failure, for his understanding. The young man's shoulders sank slightly, not in defeat, but in recognition. "You were right," he said quietly. The fox tilted its head. "Yes. No anger, no mockery, just truth. You see now what comes of not listening to my counsel." The words were not harsh, but they did not need to be. The young man lowered his gaze. "I thought," he began, then stopped. Because what could he say? That he thought he knew better? That he thought this time would be different? The fox watched him carefully, and for the first time, there was something like sympathy in its eyes. "Understanding comes at a cost," it said softly. You have paid part of it. The young man looked up again. And the rest? The fox's gaze sharpened. The rest depends on whether you truly learn. A silence passed between them. Not uncomfortable, not tense, but important. Because this was not the same meeting as before. Before he had listened. Now he had failed. And the difference mattered. Still the fox spoke again. I will help you, it said. The young man blinked in surprise. Even now? The fox's expression did not change. Even now. A pause. But not forever. The words settled heavily, because they carried a truth deeper than the journey itself. Help is not endless. Chances are not infinite. You must go straight on, the fox continued, turning slightly as though already seeing the path ahead. There is another castle. Of course there was. There, in a stall, stands the golden horse. The young man listened carefully now, not just hearing, but holding each word. Beside it lies the groom, the fox said. He will be asleep. Another pause. But not as you understand sleep. The same warning, the same quiet danger beneath it. Take the horse, the fox went on, but take it quietly. Do not wake the groom. The young man nodded slowly. And the saddle? He asked, already knowing there would be more. The fox's eyes flickered. There will be two. Of course, there will be an old one, worn, plain, made of leather. A brief silence. And there will be another. The young man did not need to ask. Golden, the fox said. Beautiful, perfect, exactly what the horse would seem to deserve. The young man closed his eyes for a moment, because now he understood. This was not about the horse, not really. This was about the choice again. Use the old saddle, the fox said quietly, not the golden one, no matter what you think, no matter what it feels like. The young man opened his eyes. I understand. The fox held his gaze. And this time, there was a difference. Before, those words had been hopeful. Now they were being tested. Understanding, the fox said slowly, is proven in the moment of temptation, not before it. The wind shifted slightly through the trees. The path ahead seemed darker now, heavier, because now the young man knew what it felt like to fail, and he knew how easy it had been. The fox stepped forward. Come, it said. It lowered its tail once more. The young man hesitated for only a heartbeat, not out of doubt, but out of awareness. Then he climbed on, and once again the world shattered into motion. The fox surged forward faster than before, its body cutting through the forest like a living current. The ground blurred beneath them, stones scattering, branches snapping back as they passed. The wind roared. His breath caught, and yet this time felt different, because now as they moved, the young man watched. Not just the path, but the fox itself. And this time he saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. The fox's form flickered again, longer, stronger. For a brief, impossible moment, it was not a fox at all. It was something taller, human, wrapped in faint, glowing chains that seemed to bind it to something unseen. Its eyes, no longer those of a beast, held something deep and ancient, something trapped. Then it was gone. The fox returned, running, silent, unchanged, or so it appeared. But the young man did not speak, because now he understood something else. This journey was not only about him, and whatever the fox truly was, it was not simply guiding him. It was waiting for something, for a choice, for an ending. And ahead, beyond the racing trees, another castle began to rise, waiting to test him once more. And this time, the cost of failure would be even greater. The second castle did not feel like the first. Where the first had been silent, this one felt watchful, not in the open, not in movement, but in the stillness between things. The fox slowed long before they reached the gates, its body lowering, its steps quieter than breath itself. The young man slid down, his feet touching the cold ground, and for a moment he simply stood there, looking up. The walls rose higher than before, darker, heavier, and though no guards stood at attention, no torches burned, no voices echoed, it did not feel empty. It felt aware. "This is where you remember," the fox said quietly. The young man nodded. He didn't need to be told again. This time, the lesson was already inside him, or so he believed. He stepped forward. The gates opened without resistance, and beyond them, just as promised, the courtyard lay still. The groom was there, curled beside the stall, one arm draped loosely across something that gleamed even in the dim light, the golden saddle. And beside him, standing tall, unmoving, and impossibly radiant, was the horse. It was more than an animal. Its coat shimmered like sunlight caught in motion, each breath releasing a soft mist into the air. Its eyes were deep, intelligent, almost human. And as the young man stepped closer, the horse turned its head slightly and looked at him. Not with fear, not with curiosity, but with something far more dangerous: expectation. The young man's heart began to pound, not from fear, from awe. This was what he had been sent to find. This was worth everything. He moved slowly, carefully, every step placed with intention. The groom snored softly beside the stall, unmoving. His grip on the golden saddle was loose, careless, yet somehow deliberate. The young man paused, because something about it felt wrong, too easy, too perfect. He reached the stall. The horse did not resist. It stood still, watching him, waiting. He looked down. There it was, the old saddle, plain, worn, leather cracked with age, nothing remarkable, nothing worthy. The fox's voice echoed in his mind. Use the old one. He reached for it. His fingers brushed against the leather, rough, cold. And then his eyes shifted, back to the golden saddle. It gleamed, perfect, untouched by time, a reflection of everything the horse was, everything it deserved. And the thought came, not loud, not forceful, but quiet, reasonable. This is wrong. He frowned slightly. The horse deserved better, did it not? Was this not the same mistake as before? Had he not learned? Why take something magnificent and bind it in something so poor? The leather saddle felt like an insult. The golden one felt like truth. The horse shifted slightly, its breath warm against the air, and for a moment it felt as though it agreed, as though it was waiting for him to make the right choice this time. The young man hesitated, because this time it was not simple. Before he had been tempted by beauty, now he was tempted by justification, by reason, by the belief that he was correcting a mistake. "I will give him the good one," he whispered to himself. "He deserves it." And in that moment, he chose. He let go of the old saddle and reached for the golden one. The instant his fingers touched it, the world broke. The groom's eyes snapped open, not slowly, not with confusion, but instantly, as if he had never truly been asleep. His grip tightened around the saddle as he let out a shout so loud it seemed to tear through the very walls of the castle. "Thief!" The word echoed, multiplied, carried through corridors and stone like a signal. The horse reared slightly, not in panic, but in something closer to disappointment. The young man stepped back. Too late. The sound of boots thundered through the courtyard. Doors slammed open, voices rose, and within moments the guards were upon him. Again, hands seized him, weapons surrounded him. The golden saddle fell from his grasp, clattering against the stone like a final verdict. He did not struggle, because now he understood, not fully, but enough. It had happened again, the same choice, different form, same result. He was dragged before the king, not the first king, but another, and this one smiled, not warmly, not kindly, but knowingly, because this too had been expected. "You stand before me twice condemned," the king said, his voice smooth and steady. The court murmured around him. The golden horse stood somewhere behind him now, silent, watching. The young man said nothing, because what was there left to say? The judgment came quickly, as it had before, the charges, the failure, the sentence, death again. And yet again there was a pause. Because stories like this are never so simple. There is a way, the king said slowly, leaning forward just slightly. Hope flickered again. Dangerous, fragile. There is a princess, he continued, a beauty beyond compare. Bring her to me, and you shall live. A pause. And not only live, the king's smile deepened. You shall have the bird and the horse. The court stirred. The offer was too great, too perfect. The young man lifted his head slowly. Another task, another chance. But now, something inside him had changed. Because he had begun to see it. The pattern, the trap, the illusion of choice. Each time he had been given something beautiful, something right, something that felt justified. And each time, it had led him here, to failure, to consequence, to the edge of everything. As he was led away once more, his mind turned not to the princess, not to the reward, but to the fox. Because now more than ever, he needed to understand, not just what to do, but why. And somewhere beyond the castle walls, in the quiet space between paths and fate, the fox was already waiting, watching. Because this time, the choice would not just test his desire, it would test his heart, and whether he had truly learned or merely suffered. He did not walk this time. He drifted, like something already half lost. The weight of his second failure pressed deeper than the first, not because it was worse, but because it was familiar. He had known. That was the difference. The first time he had been unaware. The second time, he had seen the trap forming. He had felt the pull of the choice, and still he had stepped into it. The echo of the groom's shout still rang in his mind. The look in the horse's eyes, no longer expectation, but something colder, lingered far longer than it should have. Disappointment. Not in his failure to steal, but in his failure to understand. He let out a slow breath. And for the first time since beginning this journey, he wondered if he was meant to fail. If this path had already decided its ending. If every step he took simply led him closer to a conclusion he could not escape. Why did you not listen? The voice came softly, but it struck harder than any accusation. He stopped, closed his eyes briefly, then turned. The fox stood behind him once more, exactly where it always appeared, exactly when he needed it, or when he had already failed. The young man did not try to defend himself this time. I thought I understood, he said quietly. The fox studied him. And now? The question lingered, heavy. The young man hesitated, then answered, I don't know if I do. For a moment, the fox said nothing, and then it nodded. A small movement, but meaningful. Better, it said, because doubt, unlike pride, could still learn. You see now what has happened, the fox continued, its voice neither cruel nor gentle, only steady. If you had listened, you would have carried away both the bird and the horse. The truth landed cleanly, no embellishment, no comfort, just fact. The young looked down. I failed again. Yes. The word did not soften, but neither did it condemn. Another silence passed, and then the fox stepped closer. I will help you, it said. Again, the young man looked up, surprised. Why? He asked, unable to stop himself. The fox's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment there was something deeper there, something almost weary. Because this is not finished, it said. The answer felt incomplete, but it was all he would be given. And because, the fox added more quietly, you are closer than you think. The young man frowned slightly. Closer? It did not feel that way. It felt like he was drifting further from success with every step. But the fox had not lied before. Not truly. It had warned him. Every time. And he had been the one to turn away. Listen carefully, the fox said. This time the young man did not just hear. He focused, held every word. There is another castle, the fox continued. Of course there was. There lives a princess. The air shifted slightly, not dramatically, but enough, because this was different. Not a bird, not a horse, a person. At midnight, the fox said, she goes to the bathing house. The young man's brow tightened. Why? The fox's gaze sharpened. Because that is when she is most unguarded. A pause, but not unprotected. The distinction mattered. You must go to her, the fox continued, and give her a kiss. The young man blinked slightly, caught off guard. And then she will come with you. It sounded simple, too simple, which meant it wasn't. But listen, the fox said, stepping closer still. This is where you will fail, if you're not careful. The young man's chest tightened slightly, because now he knew. This was the moment, not the castle, not the guards, not the task itself, the moment after. Do not let her go, the fox said quietly. The words carried weight. Do not allow her to return. Do not allow her to take leave of her father or her mother. The young man frowned. Why? The fox's eyes darkened slightly. Because if you do, everything will be undone. The same pattern, the same kind of warning, the same kind of choice. But this time, it would not be about beauty or worth or reason. It would be about something far more dangerous, compassion. The young man looked away for a moment because already he could feel it, the pull, the thought forming before the moment had even arrived. If she asks, how can I refuse? The fox watched him carefully. You are not being tested on kindness, it said softly. You are being tested on judgment. The words cut deeper than expected because they felt wrong, and yet somewhere inside they also felt true. The young man took a slow breath. I will not fail, he said. The fox did not respond immediately because it had heard that before. Instead, it simply turned and stretched out its tail. The invitation remained the same. The journey continued. The young man stepped forward, climbed on, and once again they ran, faster than before. The wind howled past them, the forest tearing away into streaks of shadow and light. The ground seemed to vanish beneath them, leaving only motion, only direction, only the sense of something drawing closer with every passing heartbeat. And this time, the young man did not close his eyes. He watched, and he saw it again, the flicker, stronger now, longer. The fox's body stretched, shifted, its form breaking for a fraction of a second into something unmistakably human. A figure bound in faint, glowing chains, a crown broken, a presence imprisoned. Then it snapped back. The fox ran on, unchanged, silent. But the young man's breath caught slightly, because now he understood something more. The fox was not just guiding him through the journey. It was part of it, bound to it, waiting for something that had not yet happened. And perhaps, just perhaps, that something depended on him. Ahead, the forest began to thin, the horizon opened, and far in the distance, a third castle rose, different from the others, not silent, not watchful, but alive, lights flickering, shadows moving, a place where choices would not hide in stillness, but in emotion. And as they drew closer, the young man felt it. This would be the hardest test of all, not because it was dangerous, but because it would feel right. And that was where he had always fallen before. As they came at last within sight of the castle, it rose from the earth like something half remembered from a dream, its towers pale beneath the moon, its windows dark and watchful, its gates standing open as though expecting them. Every stone seemed to whisper that this place had been waiting. And just as the old fox had said, all was still. Not a torch burned along the walls, not a guard stirred upon the battlements. Even the wind held its breath. The young man felt it then, that quiet, dangerous stillness that comes before something changes forever. Remember, the fox had told him, its amber eyes gleaming in the dark, trust nothing that begs for pity when your task is at hand. But now the fox was gone, and he was alone. He entered the castle. His footsteps echoed too loudly along the marble floors, though he tried to walk softly. The corridors twisted like a maze, lit only by thin beams of moonlight slipping through narrow windows. Shadows clung to the walls like living things. Once, just once, he thought he heard a whisper behind him, but when he turned, there was nothing. At last, the great clock in the tower began to toll. 12. Each strike rolled through the castle like a warning. And then she appeared, the princess. She moved through the corridor like a vision, her white gown trailing behind her, but her golden hair unbound and falling like sunlight over her shoulders. Her face was pale, but not with fear, with something deeper, something older, expectation, as though she had known he would come. She did not scream. She did not flee. Instead, she stepped closer. "You are late," she said softly. The young man faltered. "Late? For someone who has already failed once," she replied, her eyes searching his. Those words struck him like a blow, but before he could answer, something within him, something stubborn and human, rose against the doubt. He remembered the fox's instructions. Without another word, he reached out, drew her gently toward him, and kissed her. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The shadows recoiled. The air trembled. And then she exhaled, as though a weight she had carried for years had suddenly lifted. "It is broken," she whispered. "The spell is broken." Her fingers clutched his sleeve, not delicately but desperately. "Take me with you, now, before the castle wakes." There was urgency in her voice now, real and sharp, not the quiet calm she had worn before. The young man nodded. "Then come." He turned to lead her away, but she did not move. Instead, she pulled back. "There is one thing," she said, her voice trembling. "Only one. I must take leave of my father." The words fell between them like a crack in the ground. The young man froze. "No," he said immediately. "We must go now." Her eyes filled with tears, not gentle tears, but sudden, overwhelming grief. They spilled down her face, catching the moonlight, making her look fragile, heartbreakingly human. "Please," she whispered, "he is all I have known. I cannot leave him without a word, without a farewell." The young man turned away, pacing once, twice. The fox's voice echoed in his memory. "Trust nothing that begs for pity." But this was no trick. Was it? He looked back at her. She had fallen to her knees now, her hands clasped, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "Just a moment," she pleaded. "Only a moment. I will return. I swear it." The castle seemed to lean closer, listening. The young man's resolve began to crack. What harm could a single farewell do? What kind of man refused such a plea? At last, with a heavy breath, he nodded. "Go," he said, "but be swift." The moment the word left his lips, something changed. The air grew colder. The shadows deepened. But he did not notice. The princess rose slowly, and though her face was still wet with tears, there was something else there now, something faint, something fleeting, a smile, so slight it might have been imagined. "I will return," she said, and then she was gone. The young man waited. 1 moment, 2. The silence stretched. Then a sound, not soft, not distant, a clang, then another, then a shout. The castle awakened. Torches flared to life along the walls, one after another, like eyes snapping open in the dark. Heavy doors slammed somewhere deep within the halls. Footsteps thundered. Many of them. Too many. The young man's heart dropped. No, he turned toward the corridor where she had vanished. "Princess!" But no answer came. Only the growing roar of guards rushing through the castle. And then they were upon him. Steel flashed. Hands seized him from every side. He fought once, twice, but it was useless. They had been waiting. Or worse, they had known. As they dragged him through the corridors, he caught one last glimpse, just for a heartbeat, of the far end of the hall. There, standing in the doorway, was the princess, no longer weeping, no longer trembling. She watched him in silence. And beside her, a tall figure in shadow, her father, the king. The princess did not move to help him, did not speak. did not even look away. Only her eyes followed him, cold now, unreadable. And just before the guards pulled him out of sight, she whispered something so softly that it barely reached him. "You should have trusted the fox." The dungeon swallowed him once more, but this time it was worse, because now he understood, or thought he did. And far above in the silent halls of the castle, the princess turned away from the doorway, her expression flickering, just for an instant, with something dangerously close to regret. Or perhaps something else entirely. They dragged him from the dungeon at dawn, not gently. Chains rattled at his wrists, iron biting into skin already bruised from struggle. The long corridors of the castle no longer slept. They were alive now, lined with guards whose eyes followed him with a strange mixture of curiosity and something like pity, as though they already knew how this would end. The great hall doors opened. He was thrown forward. The young man stumbled, caught himself just before falling, and lifted his head. There, upon a throne carved of dark stone and veined like frozen lightning, sat the king. He was older than the young man expected, not weak, but worn. His beard fell long upon his chest, white as winter frost, and his eyes were not cruel. They were measuring. Beside him stood the princess, silent, still, watching. No tears now. No sign of the girl who had knelt before him only hours ago. The young man's chest tightened, but he said nothing. The king spoke. "You return to me," he said slowly, "not as a guest, but as a trespasser." His voice was calm, but it carried through the hall like distant thunder. "You steal into my house, you lay hands upon my daughter, and you would carry her away like a thief in the night." The young man straightened despite the chains. "I came only because—" The king raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. "I am not interested in your reasons," he said, "only in your worth." A pause. Then the king leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharpening. "You shall never have my daughter," he said, "unless in 8 days you dig away the hill that stops the view from my window." A murmur passed through the court. Even the guards shifted uneasily. The young man frowned. "A hill?" The king gestured. Servants rushed to pull open the great curtains behind the throne, and there it was, a mountain of earth and stone rising just beyond the castle walls, towering high enough to swallow the horizon. It blocked the light, the wind, the very sky itself, casting a long shadow over the kingdom. It did not look like something made by nature. It looked placed, impossible. "This hill," said the king quietly, "has stood there longer than you have drawn breath, longer than I have ruled. Remove it in 8 days, and she is yours." The young man stared. Then he laughed, not because it was funny, but because there was nothing else left to do. "The whole world could not take it away," he said. The king did not smile. "Then the whole world is not worthy of her." Silence again, heavy, final. The chains were struck from his wrists. A shovel was placed in his hands, and just like that, his trial began. The first day, he worked until his hands bled. The earth was hard, stubborn, as though it resisted him. Each strike of the shovel seemed to echo back in defiance. Dust filled his lungs, stones tore at his fingers, and the sun burned overhead without mercy. He did not stop, not once. By nightfall, he had barely made a mark. The second day, doubt crept in. By the third, it spoke. By the fourth, it laughed. He began to notice something strange. No matter how much he dug, the hill never seemed smaller, not truly. He would carve out a section, collapse a slope, roll stones aside, but by morning, it always looked the same, untouched, as though the hill itself healed in the night. On the 5th day, he climbed it, not to dig, but to see. At the top, the wind howled. The castle looked small below him, the king's window a distant square of shadow. And for a moment, just a moment, he thought he saw something beneath the surface of the hill. A shape, not stone, not earth, something moving. He stumbled back. "No," he whispered, "that's not possible." But the hill said nothing. By the seventh day he could barely stand. His hands were torn open, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had eaten little, slept less. Every breath felt like swallowing fire. And still, the hill remained, untouched, unbroken, unmoved. As the sun sank low, bleeding red across the sky, he dropped the shovel. "I cannot," he said hoarsely. The words felt like defeat made flesh. "I cannot do it." He sank to the ground, and for the first time since this began, he closed his eyes. A voice came from the shadows. "You never could." The young man's eyes snapped open. There, at the edge of the fading light, stood the fox. Its fur shimmered like embers in the dusk, its eyes bright and knowing. "You again," the young man breathed. "I never left," said the fox calmly. "You simply stopped listening." The young man turned away. "I failed," he said. "You warned me. I did not listen. Now I'm finished." The fox tilted its head. "Are you?" The young man let out a bitter laugh. "In one day I must do what the world cannot. Yes, I am finished." The fox stepped closer. "Then lie down." The young man frowned. "What?" "Lie down," the fox repeated, "and sleep." "That is your advice?" The young man snapped. "Sleep while I lose everything?" The fox's eyes gleamed. "Sleep while I work." Silence. The wind whispered across the hill. "You expect me to believe that you can do what I could not," the young man said. "No," said the fox. "I expect you to believe that you were never meant to do it alone." Something in those words struck deeper than the rest. Slowly, painfully, the young man lay back upon the cold earth. "Very well," he murmured. "If this is a dream, let it at least be a kind one." He closed his eyes. The night passed, but it was not quiet. The earth trembled. Deep beneath the hill, something shifted, something ancient and unwilling. Roots tore free, stones cracked, the ground groaned like a waking giant. And through it all, the fox moved. Not like an animal, but like something far older. Morning came. The young man stirred. For a moment, he did not remember where he was. Then he opened his eyes and sat up. The hill was gone. Not reduced, not broken, gone. Where it had stood was now an open expanse of green earth, stretching all the way to the horizon. The sky poured into the space like water filling a void. The wind moved freely. The light returned. The young man rose slowly, his breath caught somewhere between disbelief and awe. "What are you?" he whispered. But the fox was nowhere to be seen. Only its paw prints remained for a few steps. Then they vanished. He did not wait. He ran through the fields, through the gates, through the echoing halls of the castle, until once more he stood before the king. The court gathered again, the same throne, the same silence. The king looked at him, and for the first time something like surprise flickered in his eyes. "Well," he said. The young man stepped forward. "It is done." A murmur rippled through the hall. The king rose, slowly, deliberately. He turned and looked toward the window. The curtains were drawn aside, light flooded the room, and where once the hill had stood, there was nothing, only open sky. The king said nothing for a long time. Then at last he smiled. But it was not a warm smile. No, it was the kind of smile that comes when a game becomes interesting. "You have done what no man could do," he said softly. His gaze shifted to the princess. She stepped forward. And now, at last, there was something in her eyes again. Not coldness, not regret, something far more dangerous, hope. "And so," said the king, his voice echoing through the hall, "a promise must be honored." He descended from his throne, each step slow, measured, until he stood before the young man. "You shall have my daughter." A pause. Then, "But tell me," the king leaned closer, How did you move a mountain? The hall held its breath. The young man hesitated for just a moment, and in that moment, somewhere, far beyond the castle walls, a fox watched, waiting, because this was the moment that mattered most. The hall did not erupt into cheers. It did not celebrate. Instead, it watched. The courtiers leaned forward in their places, whispering behind jeweled hands. The guards shifted uneasily. Even the great banners hanging from the vaulted ceiling seemed to stir, though there was no wind. Because something was wrong. The king had given his word, and the king was not a man who liked to lose. Still, a promise was a promise. "You shall have my daughter," he had said. And so it was done. There was no feast, no music, no grand farewell, only a quiet procession through the gates of the castle, as though the kingdom itself wished not to draw attention to what had just happened. The young man walked beside the princess, free, victorious, and yet he could not shake the feeling that he had stepped out of one trial and into another. The princess said little as they walked. Her gaze drifted often, back toward the castle, toward the high windows, toward something unseen. Once he caught her looking at him, but when their eyes met, she turned away, as though hiding a thought she dared not speak aloud. At last they crossed beyond the shadow of the walls. The road opened before them. The sky stretched wide and endless, and only then, from the edge of the forest, where the trees grew thick and the light fell into green shadows, the fox appeared. It stepped out silently, as though it had always been there, waiting. "You have done well," it said. The young man let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "I have done what you told me," he replied, "and yet I feel as though I understand less than before." The fox's eyes flickered toward the princess. "And you should," it said softly. The young man frowned. "What do you mean?" But the fox did not answer directly. Instead, it sat back upon its haunches, its tail curling neatly around its feet. "We are not finished," it said. The young man blinked. "Not finished? You have the princess," said the fox, "but you do not yet have what was promised to you." A shadow passed across the young man's face. "The golden bird," he said quietly, "and the golden horse." The fox nodded. "We will have all three." The young man stared. "All three?" he repeated. "The princess, the horse, and the bird." The thought struck him like lightning. Too vast, too impossible. "Ah!" he said, a half laugh escaping him. "That would be a great thing indeed, but how can you contrive it?" The fox's eyes gleamed. "There are always ways," it said, "but they are not easy. And this time," it paused, "this time you must listen to me, completely." The young man hesitated. Memory stirred, sharp and unwelcome. The princess kneeling, the tears, the betrayal. His jaw tightened. "I listened before," he said, "and still I was deceived." The fox tilted its head. "No," it said calmly, "you listened until it became difficult." Silence. The words struck true. The young man looked away. The princess spoke then, for the first time since they had left the castle. "Where will you take us?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but there was something beneath it now, something searching, something wary. The fox turned its gaze upon her. "To another kingdom," it said, "one that values gold above truth." The princess's expression changed, just slightly. "Then we're not safe?" The fox smiled. "No one who seeks everything is ever safe." They began to walk. The road bent into the forest, the trees closing around them like silent witnesses. Sunlight fractured through the leaves, falling in shifting patterns across the path. For a time, no one spoke. "Then, you never told me," the young man said suddenly, "how you moved the hill." The fox did not slow. "I did not move it," it replied. The young man frowned. "Then what did you do?" "I removed what held it together." A chill ran through him. "And what held it together?" The fox glanced back. Something that did not wish to be disturbed. The young man stopped walking. And you left it free? The fox's eyes held his. Did you wish the hill to remain? The question lingered in the air, heavy and unresolved. At last, the young man said nothing more. But from that moment on, he began to listen more carefully to the silence between the fox's words. As evening fell, they came to a crossroads. 3 paths stretched before them. One led into a valley bathed in golden light. One climbed into dark mountains, jagged and severe, and one disappeared into mist. The fox stopped. "We go this way," it said, nodding toward the mist. The young man hesitated. "It looks wrong," he said. "Yes," said the fox, "it does." The princess stepped closer to the young man. "Perhaps the other road," she began. "No," said the fox sharply. For the first time there was steel in its voice. "If you wish the bird and the horse, you will follow me." Silence fell. The young man looked from the fox to the princess. Her eyes searched his, and in them he saw something new. Not manipulation, not coldness, but fear, real fear. "Trust me," she whispered. The words struck him like an echo of the past. Trust nothing that begs for pity. His heart tightened. Slowly he turned back to the fox. "And if I do not?" he asked. The fox's expression did not change. "Then you will have exactly what you have now," it said. "A single victory built upon 100 mistakes." The wind stirred, the mist shifted, and somewhere, far off, so faint it might have been imagined, there came the sound of wings, golden wings. The young man closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. "Very well," he said. "We go into the mist." The fox inclined its head. "Then we begin again." They stepped forward, and as the mist swallowed them, the world behind seemed to fade, like a story already told. But ahead, the path twisted and waited, because this time the game was not about winning a single prize. It was about whether he could hold on to all of them without losing himself in the process. The mist did not part for them. It swallowed. Step by step, the world dissolved. Trees became shadows, shadows became nothing, and even the sound of their own footsteps seemed to fade, as though the ground itself wished to forget they had ever walked upon it. Only the fox moved with certainty. Only the fox knew the way. At last the mist thinned, and there, like a jewel hidden inside a cloud, stood another castle. But this one was not pale and silent. It burned. Golden towers rose into the sky, catching the last light of the sun and casting it back in dazzling brilliance. Banners of crimson and gold snapped in the wind. The gates were open wide, and beyond them echoed the sound of music, laughter, and celebration. It was a place alive with greed, alive with desire. The young man felt it immediately. "This is no ordinary court," he said quietly. "No," replied the fox. "This is a court that measures worth in what can be taken, not what is given." The princess stiffened beside him. "Then they will not let us leave," she said. The fox's eyes flickered. "Not willingly." They stopped just short of the gates. "This is where you must listen," said the fox. The young man turned to it. "I am listening." The fox stepped closer, its voice dropping low, sharp as a blade. "If you will only listen, it can be done." The young man nodded slowly. "Speak." The fox's gaze moved briefly to the princess, then back again. "When you come before the king and he asks for the beautiful princess, you must say, 'Here she is!'" The young man flinched. The words felt wrong even before he understood them. "You want me to give her away?" "For a moment," said the fox calmly. "Only for a moment." The princess's breath caught. "You speak of me as though I were a coin," she said, her voice tight. The fox did not look at her. "Better a coin that is spent wisely," it replied, "than a treasure that is lost forever." The young man stepped forward. "No," he said, "I will not trick her again." The fox's eyes snapped to him. "And what will you do instead?" it asked. "Walk in honestly, beg for the horse, beg for the bird, Tell them your story and hope they reward you for your courage? Silence. They will take her, the fox continued, softer now, and they will take you, and you will lose everything you have already suffered to gain. The young man's jaw tightened. And if I do as you say, he asked straight. The fox held his gaze. Then you may yet leave with all three. The princess stepped between them. And what of me? She demanded. What of what I want? For a moment, the fox said nothing. Then, you want to be free, it said quietly. Her expression faltered. You want to leave the life that was chosen for you. You want to step beyond these walls, beyond these bargains, beyond these kings who trade daughters like pieces on a board. The princess stared at it. How do you know that? The fox's eyes softened, just slightly. Because I have seen many like you. A long silence followed. Then the fox continued. You must trust him, it said. The princess turned slowly to the young man. Can I? She asked. The question struck deeper than any blade. The young man hesitated. Once he had said yes without thinking. Once he had believed that intent alone was enough. But now he understood the weight of that word. I will not lie to you, just he said at last. I do not know if I can do this without hurting you again. The princess's eyes shimmered, but she did not look away. Then do not promise me safety, she said softly. Promise me truth. The young man nodded. That I can do. The fox spoke again. Listen carefully. The air seemed to tighten around them. When you stand before the king and he asks for the beautiful princess, you must say, Here she is! The young man clenched his fist but said nothing. Then, the fox continued, he will be very joyful. His attention will be upon what he believes he has gained, not upon what he may lose. The golden castle shimmered behind it as though in agreement. And you will mount the golden horse that they are to give you. The horse, the young man murmured. He could almost see it, magnificent, radiant, powerful beyond anything he had ever ridden. But you must not linger, the fox said sharply. Do not admire it. Do not hesitate. The young man nodded slowly. Go on. You will put out your hand to take leave of them, the fox said. You will greet each one calmly, without fear. The princess's breath grew shallow, and then the fox's voice dropped to a whisper. You will shake hands with the princess last. Silence. The moment stretched, heavy, unavoidable. And when you do, the fox said, its eyes burning now, you must not think, you must not doubt, you must not hesitate. The young man felt his heart begin to race. Then what? The fox leaned forward. Then lift her quickly onto the horse behind you. The prince's eyes widened. The young man swallowed. And then? The fox's voice became something fierce. Clap your spurs to his side and gallop away as fast as you can. The wind rose. The banners on the golden towers snapped louder. Somewhere inside the castle a horn sounded, long and low, as though they had been seen. As though the game had already begun, the young man looked at the princess. This is madness, he said. Yes, she replied. But there was something in her eyes now. Not fear, not hesitation. Something sharper, something alive. Will you do it? She asked. The young man hesitated. Then, will you trust me? He asked in return. She stepped closer, so close he could feel her breath. No, she said, a pause. Then, but I will choose to come with you anyway. The fox stepped back into the shadow of the trees. Then go, it said, and remember. Its voice lingered, echoing faintly even as it began to fade from sight. This time, you do not get a second chance. The gates of the golden castle stood open, waiting. The young man took a breath, then another. Then he stepped forward, the princess beside him, and together they walked into the lion's den. The golden castle did not forgive mistakes, but for once, everything went right. The gates had opened without question. The guards, dazzled by the sight of the princess, had bowed low instead of raising their spears. Word had spread faster than fire through dry grass. A prince had come, bearing beauty beyond compare. They were ushered into the great hall, gold everywhere, gold on the pillars, gold woven into the tapestries, gold glinting in the greedy eyes of those who watched from the shadows. And upon a throne that seemed less carved than hoarded, like treasure piled upon itself, sat the king. His smile came too quickly, too wide. "And what do you bring me?" he asked, his voice rich with hunger rather than joy. The young man did not hesitate. "Here she is." The words tasted like betrayal, but he said them anyway. The princess stood still. She did not look at him. Not yet. For a heartbeat, just one, the king said nothing. Then laughter burst from him, loud and triumphant. "Marvelous," he said, rising from his throne. More than marvelous. He descended the steps eagerly, circling the princess as though she were already his possession. Yes, yes, this will do perfectly. The young man forced himself not to move, not to react, not to strike, not yet. "As promised," said the king, clapping his hands sharply, "bring forth the golden horse." The hall stirred. Doors swung open, and there it was, the golden horse. It stepped into the light like a creature made not of flesh, but of sunlight itself. Its mane shimmered like molten fire. Its hooves rang like silver upon stone, and its eyes burned with something far too intelligent to be merely an animal. The young man felt it before he understood it. This was no ordinary beast. This was power, wild, untamed, watching. The horse turned its head, and for a moment, it looked straight at him. "Yours," said the king with a satisfied grin. The young man approached slowly, every step measured, every breath controlled. He placed a hand upon the horse's neck. It did not flinch, but beneath his fingers he felt something, a pulse, not of muscle, but of will, as though the horse was deciding whether to accept him or throw him to his death. "Easy," the young man murmured. The horse's ear flicked. Then, slowly, it lowered its head. Acceptance, or something like it. "Take your leave," said the king, already turning back toward the princess, his attention drifting. The young man mounted the horse. The world seemed to shift beneath him, higher, sharper, alive. He extended his hand. One by one the courtiers approached, bowing, smiling, masking their envy behind hollow politeness. He greeted them as the fox had said, calm, controlled, unhurried, closer. At last, the princess stepped forward. Their eyes met. And in that moment, everything slowed. No words passed between them, only understanding. Now, he reached for her hand. She took it, and in the same breath, he pulled. Swift, sudden, absolute. She rose from the ground as though caught by the wind itself, landing behind him upon the horse. Gasps filled the hall. Shouts followed. "Stop them!" the king roared. But it was already too late. The young man drove his heels into the horse's side, and the golden horse leapt, not forward, but through the line of guards, through the open gates, through the very air itself. It seemed as though the world could not hold it. They flew, faster than arrows, faster than thought. Behind them, chaos erupted, but ahead, there was only freedom. They did not slow until the golden castle was no more than a glint upon the horizon. The horse stopped of its own accord, breathing, but not from exhaustion, from something deeper. The young man slid from its back, helping the princess down. For a moment neither spoke. Then, "You did not hesitate," she said. The young man looked at her. "I nearly did." "But you didn't." "No," he said quietly, "I didn't." A rustle came from the trees. The fox stepped out once more. "You begin to learn," it said. The young man exhaled. "It is done," he said. "We have the horse and the princess." The fox nodded. "And one prize remains, the golden bird." The air seemed to grow colder, the light dimmer. Even the horse shifted uneasily. "Where?" the young man asked. The fox turned, and through the trees far beyond the fields and rivers they had crossed, there rose another castle. But this one did not gleam. It loomed, dark stone, narrow towers, windows like empty eyes, no banners, no music, only silence. "That," said the fox, "is where the bird is kept." The young man felt a chill settle into his bones. "That place feels," he searched for the word, "wrong." "Yes," said the fox simply. They approached at dusk. The castle gate stood closed. No guards in sight, no torches lit. It felt abandoned, and yet it was not. The fox stopped at the edge of the path. "This is as far as I go," it said. The young man frowned. "You came this far before." "And I will remain here now," the fox replied, "with the princess." The young man's heart tightened. "No," he said, "she comes with me." The fox's gaze sharpened. "Do you wish to succeed?" it asked. The question cut clean. The young man hesitated. Then he looked at the princess. "I will return," he said. She held his gaze. "Do not be long," she replied. The fox spoke again. "When you ride in, speak to the king," it said. "And when he sees that it is the right horse, he will bring out the bird." "The golden bird," the young man murmured. He could almost hear it already, the faint echo of song. "Beautiful, unnatural," the fox nodded. "But listen carefully," it continued. "You must sit still." The young man frowned. "Sit still? Do not move too soon. Do not reach too quickly. Let him believe you are uncertain." The young man nodded slowly. "And then?" "You will say that you wish to look at it," said the fox, its voice low now, precise, "to see whether it is the true golden bird." The young man repeated the words under his breath. "To see whether it is the true golden bird." "And when he places it in your hand," the fox said, its eyes locking onto his, "you must not admire it." The young man swallowed. "You must not listen to it." A pause. "You must not hesitate." The wind stirred. The dark castle seemed to breathe. "And then?" the young man asked. The fox stepped back into the shadow. "Then you ride away." The young man stood there for a long moment, the golden horse beneath him, the dark castle before him, the fox behind him, and the princess waiting, trusting, or choosing to. He took a breath, then another. Then he mounted the horse once more, and without looking back, he rode toward the final trial. Behind him, the princess watched in silence. "He will fail," she said softly. The fox did not respond. "Won't he?" she pressed. The fox's eyes remained fixed on the young man's retreating figure. "That," it said at last, "depends on whether he desires the bird." A pause, or the song it sings, and far ahead, within the dark castle, something golden stirred and began to sing. The dark castle did not shout when he entered. It listened. The gates opened with a groan that echoed too long, as though the stone itself remembered every footstep that had ever crossed its threshold. The golden horse did not hesitate, but its ears lay flat, its breath slow and heavy, as if it sensed something waiting. Inside, the air was colder, still. The young man rode forward into a hall that seemed carved from shadow. No banners hung here. No music played, only a long stretch of black stone leading to a throne that seemed less like a seat and more like a wound in the room. And upon it, the king, thin, pale, watching. His eyes gleamed the moment they fell upon the horse. "So," he said softly, "it is true." The young man said nothing. "You bring me the golden horse," the king continued, rising slowly. "Then you have earned the right to see what you came for." The young man forced himself to nod. "I would see the bird," he said, "to know if it is the true golden bird." The king smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "As you wish." They brought it out in a cage, but no cage could truly contain it. The golden bird. It shimmered like a fragment of the sun itself, its feathers catching even the faintest light and turning it into something radiant. Its eyes were bright, too bright, and when it tilted its head, it felt less like a creature and more like something that understood. Then it sang. The sound filled the hall, not loudly, not forcefully, but completely. It slipped into the young man's mind like a memory he had forgotten he possessed. It spoke of warmth, of victory, of home, of everything he had ever wanted, wrapped in a single perfect note. For a moment, he forgot everything. The fox, the warning, the plan, all of it. He leaned forward slightly, his hand lifting of its own accord. "I must see it closer," he murmured. The king's smile deepened. "Of course," he said. The cage was brought nearer, closer, closer. The bird's song softened, became something almost intimate. "Take me," it seemed to whisper. "You have earned me." The young man reached out. His fingers brushed the cage, then the door, then the bird itself, warm, alive, real. And in that instant, the fox's voice cut through the haze. "You must not listen to it." The young man's eyes snapped open. Clarity returned like a blade through fog. He did not hesitate. He seized the bird, turned, and drove his heels into the horse. The world exploded. Shouts, cries, the clash of steel. But the golden horse did not run. It flew through the hall, through the gates, through the darkness itself, as though it knew the path better than any road. Behind him the bird shrieked once, loud and furious, then fell silent. The castle vanished. The forest rushed up. And then they were gone. When he returned to the edge of the great wood, the fox was waiting. The princess stood beside it. This time when she saw him, she smiled, not cautiously, not uncertainly, but fully. "You came back," she said. The young man slid from the horse, the golden bird still held tightly in his hands. "I said I would." The fox watched him carefully. "And you did not listen to it," it said. The young man shook his head. "Not this time." The fox nodded once. "Then it is done." For a moment the world seemed to settle. The princess, the horse, the bird, all three, all one, all together. The young man exhaled, a weight lifting from his chest. "It is over," he said. The fox's gaze lingered on him. "No," it said quietly. The air shifted. Something changed. The fox stepped closer. "There is one thing left," it said. The young man frowned. "What thing?" The fox's voice softened. "Pray kill me." Silence fell. The words did not make sense at first. The young man blinked. "What?" "Kill me," the fox repeated, "and cut off my head and my feet." The forest seemed to hold its breath. The princess stared. "You cannot be serious," she said. But the fox did not look at her. Its eyes remained fixed on the young man. "You must do it," it said. The young man stepped back. "No." The word came instantly, firm, unshaken. "I will not." The fox did not react. "You have done everything else I asked," it said calmly. "Why not this?" "Because this is madness," the young man replied. "You have helped me, guided me, saved me, and now you ask me to repay you with death?" The fox tilted its head. "Is that how you see it?" "Yes," the young man said, "and I will not do it." A long silence followed. The fox studied him. Then slowly it stepped back. "As you wish," it said. But there was something different now. Something distant. Something resigned. "I will at any rate give you good counsel," the fox continued. The young man said nothing. "Beware of two things," said the fox. The wind stirred again, carrying the words like a warning carved into air itself. "Ransom no one from the gallows." The young man frowned slightly. "And sit down by the side of no river." The princess glanced at him. "That seems simple enough," she said. The fox's eyes flickered. "Yes," it said. "Simple things are often the hardest to obey." The young man straightened. "Well," he said, forcing a lighter tone, "it is no hard matter to keep that advice." The fox looked at him for a long moment, as though trying to decide something, as though weighing a future the young man could not yet see. Then, without another word, it turned and walked into the forest, not vanishing this time, not fading, just walking, step by step, until the trees closed around it, and it was gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. The princess spoke first. "Why would it ask that?" she said softly. The young man shook his head. I do not know, but something about it lingered, something unresolved, like a door left slightly open. They began to ride through the great wood, through winding paths and shifting light. The golden bird remained quiet now, but sometimes when the wind changed, it would hum faintly as though remembering its song. The golden horse moved steadily beneath them, and the world, for the first time, seemed almost peaceful, until they saw it, a gallows, rising stark and crooked against the sky, and from it a figure hung, not dead, not yet, barely breathing. A man, the rope tight around his neck, his body trembling, his eyes wide with silent pleading. The young man slowed the horse. The princess gripped his arm. "No," she whispered. The young man did not answer. The fox's words echoed in his mind. Ransom no one from the gallows. The wind shifted. The man's gaze locked onto his. Desperate, begging, human. "Please," the man croaked. The young man's grip tightened. "It is no hard matter," he had said. No hard matter at all. And yet he did not move, not forward, not away. He simply sat there, caught between two paths, two choices, two futures. And somewhere deep in the forest, unseen, unheard, a fox watched, waiting. The road did not fork. It narrowed. The young man sat frozen for only a heartbeat before the gallows, long enough to feel the weight of the fox's warning press against his chest like a stone. Ransom no one from the gallows. The man hanging there gasped again, a thin, breaking sound. "Please." The princess tightened her grip on his arm. "We cannot save everyone," she whispered. "You know that now." The young man's jaw clenched. "Yes," he said. And with that, he turned the horse away. The rope creaked behind him. The sound followed them longer than it should have. They rode on. But something had shifted. The forest did not feel peaceful anymore. Every branch seemed to reach, every shadow seemed to lean closer, as though the world itself had taken note of his choice. The golden bird gave a faint, low note, almost disapproving. The princess said nothing. At last the trees thinned, the road widened, and in the distance, a village. Familiar, too familiar. The young man slowed. His heart began to beat faster. "I know this place," he said. The princess looked at him. "Is this your home?" "Not far from it," he replied. "This is where I left them." "Them?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. Before he could, a noise reached them, loud, chaotic, voices shouting, feet running, a restless, rising uproar that carried across the fields like a storm about to break. The young man frowned. "What is happening?" They rode closer. The crowd thickened near the center of the village, gathered around something tall and dark against the sky, something he had already seen once before, the gallows. The young man's chest tightened. "Again," he murmured. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped and pushed his way through the crowd. "What is the matter?" he demanded. A villager turned to him. "Two men are to be hanged," he said. "Thieves, robbers, caught on the road." The young man's breath caught. "Robbers." Something cold slid through him. He moved faster, forcing his way through the bodies, through the noise, through the thick, suffocating press of people, until he saw them, and the world seemed to stop. Two men stood bound beneath the gallows, bruised, dirty, defiant, and unmistakable, his brothers. For a moment he could not breathe. Memories surged, of childhood laughter, of rivalry, of the long road that had divided them, of the moment he had left them behind. And now here they were, not lost, not gone, but broken. One of them looked up. Recognition flared. "You?" he rasped. The other laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Well," he said, "isn't this a turn of fate?" The rope was already being prepared. The crowd leaned in, hungry, waiting. The princess reached his side. "Do you know them?" she asked. The young man did not look at her. "Yes," he said quietly, "they are my brothers." Silence fell around them, not from the crowd, but from within him. The fox's words returned, sharper now. clearer. Ransom no one from the gallows. The same warning, the same moment. But this time, it was not a stranger. Cannot they in any way be saved? He asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. The villager shrugged. They are condemned, he said. Their crimes are many. There must be some way, the young man pressed. The man looked at him more closely now. There is always a way, he said slowly, but it is not a cheap one. The young man's grip tightened. What price? The villager smiled faintly. All that you have. A murmur passed through the crowd. Every coin, the man continued, every piece of gold. Pay it, and they walk free. The princess stepped forward sharply. No, she said. The young man turned to her. You heard the fox, she continued. You know this is wrong. They are my brothers, he said. They are thieves, she replied. Murderers, perhaps. Men who chose their path. And I am to let them die, he asked. Her eyes flashed. You are to survive, she said. You are to keep what you have fought for, not throw it away because of blood that did not stand by you. The words struck hard, because they were true, but not complete. The brothers watched, one with bitterness, the other with something darker, expectation. The young man looked from them, to the crowd, to the rope, then down at his hands. Everything he had gained, everything he had suffered for, all of it, balanced on a single choice. He did not stay to think about it. Take it, he said. The words came quickly, decisively, before doubt could take hold. All of it. The crowd stirred. The villager's eyes widened slightly. Are you certain? He asked. The young man did not hesitate. Yes. The gold was taken. Every coin, every trace of wealth, gone. The ropes were cut. The brothers fell to the ground, gasping, coughing, clutching at their throats. Alive, the crowd dispersed slowly, disappointed, denied their spectacle. The princess stood still, watching him. You have done it again, she said quietly. The young man did not answer because he knew exactly what she meant. Open. The brothers rose, unsteady, but smiling, not with gratitude. No, with something sharper, something that did not sit well in the light. Well, said one, dusting himself off, and it seems our little brother has done well for himself. The other laughed. Well enough to throw it all away. The young man met their gaze. You are free, he said. That is enough. For now, one replied. They joined him, as though nothing had happened, as though they had always been meant to walk beside him. And so the young man rode on, the princess beside him, his brothers walking close behind, toward home. But the road felt different now, heavier, slower. The golden bird remained silent. The golden horse did not shine as brightly, and somewhere, deep within the memory of the forest, a fox's warning echoed, ignored, broken, set aside. The young man had thought it no hard matter, a simple thing, a choice easily kept. But now, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the road, it no longer felt simple. Because some choices do not end when they are made. They follow, they wait, and they change everything that comes after. The road home curved back toward memory, and memory, it seemed, was waiting. The trees thickened, the air cooled, and before long the young man felt it. The quiet recognition of a place he had once stood before when everything had begun. The great wood. The same. And yet, not the same, because now he returned with more than hope. He returned with everything. The princess walked beside the golden horse, her hand resting lightly upon its neck. The bird, still and silent, shimmered faintly in its cage. And behind them the two brothers followed, close enough to be companions, but never quite close enough to be trusted, though the young man did not yet see that. It is cooler here, said one of the brothers, glancing upward as the canopy closed above them. More pleasant than the road. The other nodded. And quieter. The young man smiled faintly. Yes, he said, I remember. But memory is not always a warning. Sometimes it is a trap. They came at last to the river. It wound through the forest like a silver thread, its surface smooth and inviting, catching the dappled light and turning it into something almost magical. The sound of the water was soft, gentle enough to lull the mind, to loosen thought, to make one forget. And that was its danger. "Let us sit," said one brother, stretching his arms as though weary from a journey he had not truly made. "We have come far. We should rest a while." "Yes," said the other quickly. "By the water. It is the best place." The princess stiffened slightly. The young man did not notice. "Only a moment," the first brother added. "To eat, to drink, to gather strength before we go on." The river whispered, the shade embraced, the world felt, for the first time in days, safe. The young man hesitated, only for a moment, a flicker, a shadow of a thought. "Sit down by the side of no river," the fox's voice, clear, sharp, unmistakable. But it passed, like a ripple smoothed over by the current. "Yes," he said at last, "we will rest." They sat. The grass was soft beneath them, the air cool against their skin, the river's gentle sound wrapped around them like a lullaby. The golden horse lowered its head but did not drink. The golden bird shifted but did not sing. The princess remained standing, watching. "You should sit," said one brother, gesturing casually. She shook her head. "I prefer to stand." The brother's smile tightened, just slightly. "As you wish." The young man leaned back against a tree, closing his eyes for a moment. Just a moment. The journey had been long, the trials many, and now at last there was nothing left to do. Nothing left but return home. He did not see them move, not at first. Only a shift in the air, a silence where there should have been sound. Then, hands, rough, sudden, violent. Before he could react, they were upon him, his brothers. "What?" he began. But the words never finished. They struck him from behind, driving the breath from his lungs. He stumbled forward, grasping for balance, but the ground was gone. The riverbank fell away beneath him, and he fell. Cold, shock, darkness. The water closed over him, swallowing the world in a single merciless instant. Above, laughter, distant, distorted. "Fool," one brother said. "He believed us," said the other. The young man struggled, the current pulling at him, dragging him deeper, farther from the light. His hands clawed at nothing, his breath burned in his chest. The last thing he saw, before the river took him, was the sky, fractured, fading, and then nothing. Above the riverbank the brothers stood, breathing hard, but smiling. "Well," said one, dusting his hands, "that is done." The other turned to the princess. "You will come with us?" he said. She did not move. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned. "You think this will end well for you?" she asked. The brothers laughed. "It already has," one replied. They took the horse. The golden creature resisted, rearing, striking, refusing to move, but they forced it forward with harsh hands and cruel commands. They took the bird, but it remained silent, watching, waiting. And the princess, they did not take her gently. The journey back was swift, triumphant, or so they believed. When they reached the king's court, they told their tale boldly. "All this," they declared, "have we won by our labor." They spoke of trials they had never faced, of dangers they had never endured, of victories that were not theirs. And the king believed them, or pretended to. There was great rejoicing, the hall filled with music, with laughter, with celebration. The golden horse was led to the stables, the golden bird placed upon a perch of finest gold, the princess adorned in silks and jewels. But something was wrong. The horse would not eat. It turned its head away from every offering, its eyes dark and distant, as though searching for something that was no longer there. The bird would not sing. It sat in silence, its golden feathers dimmed, its gaze fixed beyond the walls, as though listening for a voice that had been lost. And the princess, she wept, not softly, not quietly, but with a grief that filled the halls more completely than any song ever could. At night, when the music died and the torches burned low, she would stand by the window and stare into the darkness, waiting, hoping, knowing, because somewhere far below the river's surface, or perhaps beyond it, something had not ended. And deep within the forest, where the path first began, a fox lifted its head and listened, as though it had just heard something return. The fall did not kill him, but it came close. The river was not deep, not as it had seemed when he plunged into it, when the sky shattered and the world collapsed around him. It had run thin over the season, leaving behind a bed of jagged stone and slick mud, a place where water whispered rather than roared, and that was the only thing that saved him. He struck the bottom hard. The breath fled his body. Pain exploded through him, sharp, blinding, absolute. For a moment he could not move, could not think, could not even cry out. The world narrowed to a single truth. He was broken. Time passed. Or perhaps it only felt like it. At last he stirred. His limbs trembled as he pushed himself upward, every movement a protest, every breath a knife. He looked around. The riverbed stretched empty. Above him, the bank rose steep and unforgiving, a wall of earth and roots that seemed to lean inward, as though watching him struggle. There was no path, no foothold, no way out. "They're gone," he whispered. His voice echoed faintly, swallowed by the hollow of the river. The princess, the horse, the bird, all gone, taken, and he left behind. He tried to climb once, twice. Each time the earth crumbled beneath his grip, sending him sliding back down into the dust and stone. His hands bled, his strength faded. At last he collapsed again. A bitter laugh escaped him. "So this is how it ends," he said hoarsely. "Not with glory, not with triumph, but with silence and regret." A rustle came from above, soft, familiar. "You never learn, do you?" The voice cut through the stillness like a blade. The young man closed his eyes. "I was hoping," he said weakly, "that you would not come, just to say that." The fox appeared at the edge of the bank, looking down, watching him. Its eyes were not angry, but they were not kind either. "I warned you," said the fox. The young man let out a slow breath. "I know. Twice," the fox continued. "Twice I gave you simple counsel, and twice you cast it aside." "I know," the young man repeated. Silence stretched between them, heavy, honest. "Why?" the fox asked at last. The question was not sharp, not accusing, just curious. The young man stared at the broken stones beneath him. "They were my brothers," he said. "And the river," the fox pressed. He hesitated. Then, "I was tired," he admitted. "I thought, just for a moment, I could rest." The fox studied him. "And now?" The young man looked up. Pain still burned in his body, but something else had taken root beneath it. Clarity. "Now I know that the hardest choices are the ones that seem easiest," he said. The fox's tail flicked once. At that, it almost smiled. "Yet," said the fox, "I cannot leave you here." The young man blinked. "Why not?" he asked quietly. The fox tilted its head. "Because your story is not finished," it said. It stepped closer to the edge. "Lay hold of my tail," it said. The young man hesitated only a moment, then dragged himself forward, every movement a struggle, every breath a battle. He reached, grasped, held on. "Hold fast," said the fox. And then it pulled. The force was sudden, immense, far greater than the small creature should have possessed. The young man felt himself lifted, dragged upward along the steep bank, stones tearing beneath him, roots snapping as he rose. For a moment he thought he would fall again, but the fox did not falter, did not slow, and then he was at the top. He lay there gasping, the sky above him wide and endless once more, alive. The fox stepped back. You are fortunate, it said. The young man sat up slowly. No, he replied, I am not. The fox raised an eyebrow. I am only not finished yet. The fox's gaze sharpened. Then listen well, it said. Your brothers have not simply taken what was yours. A pause. They have set watch. The young man's chest tightened. To kill you, the fox finished, if you are seen within the kingdom. The weight of it settled slowly. Not just betrayal, not just theft, but intent. Final, absolute. What must I do? The young man asked. The fox looked at him carefully. Disappear, it said. And so he did. He tore his clothes, soiled them with dust and ash, wrapped himself in rags until no trace of the man he had been remained. His posture bent, his voice roughened. Even his eyes, once bright with purpose, dimmed beneath the mask of weariness. A poor man, a nobody, a shadow among shadows. And like that, he entered the king's court. No one stopped him. Why would they? He was nothing, less than nothing, just another wanderer seeking scraps and shelter. But the moment he crossed the threshold, something changed. In the stables, the golden horse lifted its head, it sniffed the air. Then, for the first time since it had been brought there, it began to eat. In the great hall, the golden bird stirred. Its feathers shimmered, and then it sang. The sound rang clear and pure, cutting through the false celebration like truth through lies. And in her chamber, the princess stopped weeping. She turned, slowly, as though she had felt something long lost return. Back in the hall, murmurs spread. What is this? The king demanded, rising. The horse eats. The bird sings. How can this be? The young man stepped forward, no longer hiding, no longer silent. There is a reason, he said. The court turned, the brothers froze, recognition flickered in their eyes, followed by something darker, fear. You, one of them breathed. Impossible, said the other. The young man pulled back the rags, stood tall, bruised, broken, but unbowed, and he told the truth, all of it. The journey, the fox, the trials, the betrayal, the river. Every word fell like a stone into still water. Ripples spreading, unavoidable. The king listened, and as he did, his expression changed, not with surprise, but with understanding. When the young man finished, the hall was silent. Then the king spoke. Seize them. The guards moved instantly. The brothers did not fight. There was nowhere left to run. They were taken, judged, punished, and the false story they had built collapsed. The princess stepped forward. Her eyes never left the young man. You came back, she said. I said I would. This time there was no doubt. The king descended from his throne. You have proven yourself, he said, not with tricks, not with luck, but with endurance, with truth. And so the princess was given to him again. The golden horse stood beside him. The golden bird sang above him. And for the first time, nothing felt uncertain. Years passed. The king grew old. And when at last he died, there was no question. The young man, once the least among his brothers, became heir to the kingdom. But even then, even with crown upon his head and the world at his feet, there was one memory that never left him. A voice in the forest, calm, patient, unyielding. Pray kill me. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, he would wonder what might have happened if just once he had listened completely. Time did what it always does. It moved on. The kingdom healed. Where there had once been whispers of deception and false triumph, there was now a steadiness, a quiet strength that grew under the rule of the young man who had once been the least among his brothers. He ruled not with pride, but with memory. He remembered hunger. He remembered failure. He remembered the weight of choices that seemed small and changed everything. The golden horse roamed freely now, no longer bound by harsh hands or false masters. It would come when called, but only by him. The golden bird sang again, not always, not for show, but when it did, the entire court would fall silent, as though the world itself leaned in to listen. And the princess, she was no longer a prize, no longer something to be won or lost. She walked beside him as an equal, her voice steady, her eyes clear, her laughter something rare but real. And yet, there was always something unfinished, a thread left untied, a question that lingered in the quiet moments. It came back to him often, not as a memory, but as a presence. Pray kill me. At first he ignored it, then he tried to forget it. But the longer he ruled, the more he understood. Some debts are not paid with time. One day, long after the kingdom had settled into peace, he left the castle without escort. No guards, no court, no crown, just himself. I will return by nightfall, he told the princess. She studied him carefully. You are going to the forest, she said. It was not a question. Yes. She stepped closer. The young man nodded. A silence passed between them, not heavy, not fearful, but knowing. Then do not return unchanged, she said softly. He did not answer, because he knew he wouldn't. The forest welcomed him differently this time, not as a stranger, not as a wanderer, but as someone who had already been tested within its depths. The trees seemed older, the shadows deeper, and the air still held that quiet, watchful presence. He walked without hesitation, as though some part of him already knew the way. And there, at the place where it had all begun, the fox waited. It stepped from the shadows slowly, no sudden movement, no mystery, just there, as it had always been. You have come, said the fox. I should have come sooner, the young man replied. The fox tilted its head. Sooner would not have made you ready. The young man stepped closer. I am ready now. The fox studied him, long, deeply, as though searching for something beneath the surface. And what is it you think you are ready for? It asked. The young man did not hesitate. For the truth, he said. A flicker passed through the fox's eyes, something like approval. Then, slowly, it lowered its head. Then give me what I asked for, it said quietly. The words did not strike like they once had. They did not confuse. They did not feel wrong. They felt inevitable. Pray kill me, said the fox, its voice softer now than it had ever been, and cut off my head and my feet. The forest fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. The young man's hand moved to his sword, but he did not draw it. Not yet. Why? He asked. The fox lifted its gaze, and for the first time there was something in its eyes that had never been there before. Not wisdom, not cunning, not distance. Pain. Because I cannot end this myself, it said. The young man frowned. What is this? He asked. A curse? A punishment? The fox did not answer immediately. Instead, it stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint trembling beneath its fur. I have guided you, it said, tested you, watched you choose and fail and choose again. A pause. And still, I remain. The young man's grip tightened. Then tell me the truth, he said. The fox held his gaze, and this time it did. I was not always this, it said. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. I was once a man, the fox continued, a prince, brother to the one you now call your wife. The young man's breath caught. I was lost, the fox said, not by accident, not by misfortune. A shadow crossed its eyes, but by pride. The wind stirred, soft, uneasy. I sought what was not mine to take, it continued. I trusted my own cleverness above all else, and for that I was bound to this form. A curse, the young man whispered. Yes, said the fox, and you could not break it yourself? No. The answer came without hesitation. I could guide, the fox said, advise, warn, but never choose. A pause. Only another could free me. The young man looked down at his sword, then back at the fox. And all this time he said, "You knew." "I hoped," the fox corrected gently. Silence. The young man drew his sword. The sound rang softly in the stillness. "Will it hurt?" he asked. The fox almost smiled. "Only for a moment," it said. The young man stepped forward, every movement deliberate, every breath steady. This was not violence, not truly. "This was Ranku," said the fox. And for the first time, there were tears in its eyes. The young man did not hesitate. The blade fell. The forest shuddered. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, no breath. Then light. It did not burst. It unfolded, slowly, softly, like dawn breaking through darkness that had lasted far too long. Where the fox had lain, a man stood, tall, pale, changed, but unmistakably human. He drew a breath. As though for the first time in years, the young man lowered his sword. "You," he began. The man turned to him and smiled. Not with cunning, not with mystery, but with something simple, something real. Gratitude. "I told you," he said quietly, "your story was not finished." The young man stared. "You are." "The brother she lost," the man finished. And somewhere far beyond the forest, in a castle filled with light, a princess suddenly turned, as though she had felt something impossible return. Back in the forest, the two men stood in silence, the past and the present, at last aligned. And for the first time since the journey began, there was nothing left unfinished.